If you think you have any of these symptoms, you may have hearing loss. Unfortunately, most people with hearing loss wait 7 years when they first notice some of these symptoms before they seek help. If you think you have a hearing loss or having difficulty understanding speech, schedule for a complete hearing evaluation with Dr. Daniel R. Schumeyer and Associates, audiologist in Johnson City or Greenville, Tennessee. Call 423-928-5771 for their Johnson City office and 423-638-2721 for their Greenville office, or check them out on their website at johnsoncityhearingcenter.com.
I just went to break. We just lost connection. Don't worry. It just went... I just went to a break, and then I'll bring you off here, because I do want to ask you about the Hall of Fame and all this. And
Hey, by the way, if I lose you again, call my cell phone at 904-910-4463.
Four.
Problems with my landline.
Okay.
I actually got some power here going on.
Oh my goodness. Well, you like those rivers that run north, right? The Monongahela and the St. John's.
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway. Here we go. All right. We got Vito back. Talk quarterbacks, you talk Peyton Manning, you talk coaches, you talk Don Shula, talk football writers, you talk Vito Stellino. I mean, you covered Alex Karras, for crying out loud. I'm impressed by that. So Tri-City Sports Now talking a little of the NFL. And I do want to go and talk one NFL story that's come on today and yesterday as well, was Jon Gruden getting hired by the Raiders. Now, I know that Mark Davis said he'd been trying to hire him for 6 years, but that actually, I think, leads a little bit to my theory here, and I want to run it by you and see if you agree. I really don't think that Gruden was a really strong coaching candidate, somebody that teams would have considered to bring back, until the Tennessee Volunteers fans, delusionally in my opinion, but still were clamoring somehow for Jon Gruden to coach the Vols. Big news, the then AD John Curry actually met with them to see about this, but I happen to think that line, that famous Tennessee rumor, if you will, got the wheels rolling, and then maybe Gruden saying, you know what, ESPN only has the contract to 2021 with Monday Night Football. As you say, we're a little oversaturated. Who knows what the future is for the game. Maybe I'll go back to the Raiders. Maybe I'll go back to the pros. Do you think that there's anything to my theory here, that it was actually the Tennessee Volunteers fans clamoring for Jon Gruden to come to Knoxville that maybe actually made this guy who was out of coaching for 9 years a viable coaching candidate again?
Yeah, I really don't know. That's a weird thing. I just think it's a strange hire. I mean, have you looked closely at Tampa Bay record after the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
The Super Bowl team won Super Bowl, and then the team went into the ground. He got fired. I mean, what has he done to make himself this attractive a candidate? He's got a great personality. He wins the press conference, but he better get himself some pretty good coordinators, because I think he's kind of one of these celebrity coaches, that likes the attention and all that. But I don't know how it's going to work out.
That being said, I do think the NFL does need celebrity coach. That is one thing. This past year, exception maybe Mike Tomlin, but there wasn't that personality for like a Rex Ryan contemporarily, or historically someone like, let's just say Hank Stram. Think of the old Super Bowl highlight film, that sort of thing. And I think that that's sorely missing in the NFL. So from that standpoint, I'm glad to see Jon Gruden back. We're talking to Vito Stellino. VitoStellino.com is his website. He's covered the NFL. We were talking about, the Redskins dynasty, the Steelers dynasty, the creation of the Jaguars, the ending, was it, of the Baltimore Colts? You were covering this, the Colts back then as well, or were you still at the Post-Gazette then?
I covered the last 2 years of the Colts before they moved.
Okay, so the last couple of years of the Colts. Let's look at, and those were fun years, a winless team. That had to be a lot of fun to cover right there. But anyway, I did want to say this. I know that you mentioned this in a previous interview, talking about the dynasties. And hey, you've been in the NFL press boxes since before the Super Bowl. But you told me that you thought that the Steelers dynasty, with the Steelers of the 70s, could beat the contemporary New England Patriots. And what I would ask is just, how would that be possible? Because linemen are so much bigger today. But why would you take in a dream matchup with the Steelers of then and the Patriots of now, Chuck Noll Steelers?
They had 9 Hall of Famers. Do you think the Patriots had 9 Hall of Famers?
No, I just wonder how, a Larry Brown who was able to play tight end, for crying out loud, could handle today's defensive end. That's all.
Well, but they had a lot of stalwarts. They were a big tight end team.
Well, I'm saying when they moved him to tackle.
Do the Patriots have receivers like Swan Stalwart? Do they have a running back like Franco? Do they have a middle linebacker like Lambert? An outside linebacker like Ham? A quarterback like Mel Blunt? I just think the Steelers, they had 9 Hall of Famers. Do they have Patriots have an offensive lineman like Mike Webster? Steelers just had too much talent. Now, I know everybody today wants to believe they're bigger and faster and all that kind of stuff, but it's talent, and I just think the Steelers would have had too much talent.
It is interesting to consider, what would go on. You talk about then and now and say smaller athletes, but would an athlete of days gone by now with modern training methods be able to be bigger and a little bit faster? And also with the modern day athlete, if back then when, the training methods aren't what they are today, when we're taking salt tablets, for crying out loud, might they be a little smaller and slower if they were under those training methods as well? One thing of similarity, though, between the Patriots and Steelers that I'm beginning to see, we're hearing a lot about this week, is that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick don't necessarily like each other. And that does kind of remind me to the other all-time NFL, the duo of quarterback coach that Brady and Belichick passed in all-time victories, and that's Bradshaw and Noll, who didn't necessarily like each other that much either. Do you see any similarities there?
A lot of people don't like Bill Belichick, so I think it's a different situation. There was no animosity on Noll's part. It was just, Bradshaw was a very, tremendous athlete and all that, but he was like very insecure, and he wanted the kind of guy that patted him on the back all the time, and that wasn't Noll's style. Noll was a teacher who showed you how to do it. Noll let Bradshaw call the plays. So it was, that was all on, that was a one-sided deal.
I know that Joe Gordon, said that on a Football Life with Chuck Noll, Vito. I do want to say this. I do remember reading in a book about 3 bricks shy of a load, and there was a circumstance in the old days when, Bradshaw did something that Noll didn't like, and he came to the sideline, and somebody in the press box sitting next to Roy Blunt Jr., the writer who wrote this book, was looking down on binoculars and says, Chuck Noll isn't a swearer, and he just laid the F-bomb 6 times on Terry Bradshaw. And so, Bradshaw talking about it, and from that standpoint, I do see where there would be animosity and all that. But Chuck Noll and Bill Belichick, very different personalities. One of my favorite stats, last game Chuck Noll ever coached was a victory against Bill Belichick.
Oh, is that right?
That was last game, 91 season. Yes, Richard Shelton had a pick 6 in that game. Last game Chuck Noll ever coached, he beat Bill Belichick. That's a true story. Anyway, Vito Stellino knows the history. I love talking football history. We've looked at the contemporary. I do want to talk to him. He votes on the Hall of Fame. Let me ask you, is this year Jerry Kramer finally gets in?
Probably, because the Old Timers Committee is recommending him, and they tend to rubber stamp the committee, so I think he probably will, so I think the odds are in his favor.
Okay, who are you liking? The modern day candidates here are guys like Everson Walls, the corner for the Cowboys, Terrell Owens, great wide receiver for the 49ers and 4 other teams, Brian Urlacher, Randy Moss, a Hall of Fame receiver from among other teams, the Patriots. I mean, there would be a Hall of Fame Patriots receiver. Kevin Maue, the great, he finished up with the Titans and also played for the Seahawks and the Jets, great center. John Lynch, the great free safety for Denver. Ray Lewis for the Baltimore Ravens. Edgerrin James, the great running back for the Colts. Ty Law, Patriots secondary. Joe Jacoby, wasn't the greatest pitchman in the world. I'll get to that later on, but he was a great tackle for the Hogs. Steve Hutchinson, a guard. Brian Dawkins, the safety for the Eagles. Alan Faneca, the guard for the Steelers. Isaac Bruce, wide receiver for primarily the St. Louis Rams. And Tony Baselli, tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars for 7 years. Now, I want to ask you, you've covered a lot of these guys. Baselli was a guy that you wrote about. We're talking a little bit, I'm trying to see, Joe Jacoby would be a guy that you also covered. Are you giving the presentation for any of these players on Super Bowl weekend when the Hall of Fame is chosen?
I give it the first presentation, but of course I chime in on players. I think in the Hall of Fame I think virtually all 50 guys are worthy, and if you voted up or down each guy, a lot of them would make it, but that's not the way the rules go. First, you got to they weren't a steady stream. They want to go a huge group 1 year, so they cut 15, then to 10, and then to 5, and then so those of the last 5 usually make it all the way. They have a second vote on all 5. So another factor is Jacoby and Emerson Walls. There's their last year of modern eligibility. Does that give them a little edge? People think, hey, these other guys have other chances, or that type of thing. I mean, I think Baselli was a better tackle than Jacoby, but Baselli's got to be on the ballot for another 10 years. If he'll get in later on. So when people say let's go for Jacoby, I don't know. And really, there's only 4 spots because Ray Lewis is automatic.
Yeah.
So there's only 4 spots. There'll be a big push for Randy Moss. So that'll make it more difficult for Terrell Owens, and 2 receivers, but the fact that they cut it down rather than saying this guy Hall of Famer, this guy Hall of Famer, that's the way baseball does it. They give you a bunch of names, if any of them get 80%, they're in, But football prefers this process, so only 5 guys, so it's awfully difficult. People complain, well, why did you elect him? Well, my answer to that is, well, who are you going to take out to make room for your guy? That type of thing, So it's a very, of course, it's a Hall of Fame, so I guess it should be very difficult. But yeah, it's going to be very. I think, except for Ray Lewis, says there will be a lot of debate. There'll be very close votes.
I've actually gone over here on WEMB, Irwin, but talking to Vito Stellino about football history and, the Hall of Fame, he has a vote. We've been talking about the playoffs. How can we resist here? I do want to ask you, though, on relocated teams, one guy that I did not talk about was Robert Brazil, Old Timers Committee, former linebacker for the Houston Oilers, those great teams with Earl Campbell and such. But this is what I want to ask you. Isaac Bruce, basically, he played for the St. Louis Rams, relocated franchise. Robert Brazil, relocated franchise. It's supposed to be someone that covered that player that makes the presentation in that Hall of Fame vote. How do you have with relocated players? I mean, who's going to be championing Isaac Bruce of the St. Louis Rams in this year's Hall of Fame vote?
Well, I think Bruce has it tough because he's going against Boston and Owens, so I would be surprised if he made it. Sometimes the position you're at, who else is on the ballot, makes a big difference.
But do you understand what I'm saying? For relocated players, I mean, if I wanted to make the Tennessee fans happy around here, Burt Rechichar, just going back to a guy from the old days, the Baltimore Colts, and I wanted to make a presentation. Well, I know that's the old days, and it's the real old days, it's the 50s, but who covering the Baltimore Colts? I mean, would it be you that would make such a presentation? In other words, it's to my understanding now that I know Howard Balzer is based in St. Louis, and he has a vote, but who would champion old St. Louis Rams for the Hall of Fame in that meeting if you're moving the team, and now it's the guy in L.A. who's voting on the Hall of Fame and not the guy in St. Louis? How can Isaac Bruce really get a fair shake with a presentation under these rules?
I think people overlook the fact that moving, I think think they judge them on how they play and that type of thing. And there's enough other guys in the room that are going to, make the case. So I don't think that's that big of a
deal.
Of a setback for players to change teams. I think Brazil's going to make it. The Old Timers Committee is champion of it. So I don't think that's a major problem.
All right. Well, my final question then for you, Vito Stellino of VitoStellino.com. Who's going to win a Super Bowl?
If Brady stays healthy, I have to go to the Patriots.
Even with the pass defense, just that they've got the number of the Steelers, and even though the NFC seems to be a little bit stronger this year, you're going with the Patriots to win their, I guess it would be their 6th Super Bowl to the Steelers. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, it's Vito Stellino. And I mean, this man was covering Alex Karras when he was telling the jokes of paper that, George Plimpton and Myron Cope were writing down that got Paper Lion onto the bookshelves and then later on onto the silver screen. So the man has been around, the man knows his football, and the man has covered both the Jaguars and the Steelers. See why we have him on? It's Tri-City Sports Now looking at the NFL. We'll take a look now, more local ideas. Hall of Fame, Frank Beamer has made it in the College Football Hall of Fame back after this. Well, thank you, Vito.
Hey, enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, we went a little long. I'll try to give you a call back a little bit later.